My name is Erica Parker. This is Michelle Baumgartner. We are the program administrators for the Monterey Regional Stormwater Management Program, affectionately called Mr. SWIMP. So a couple items of housekeeping before I hand it off to my lovely colleague. Bathrooms are on either side. So women's is over there, men's is over there. Please take your bio breaks as needed because we will not be pausing at any point. And if you have not signed in at the back, please do so or you're not going to get credit. Folks online, we've already got all of your information, so we're good there.
Thank you, Erica. Today, we welcome Patrick Grogan, who is an associate engineer with the city of Seaside. He is our presenter today. He is a qualified SWIP developer, a professional engineer who has worked in engineering consulting and related fields for over 10 years. He has worked successfully with teams in planning, design, and consultation of capital improvement and infrastructure projects. Today, Patrick will be presenting an overview of implementing and inspecting construction BMPs and how to protect your water quality at your job site. So please help me welcome Patrick Grogan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle. Appreciate it. Like Michelle said, my name is Patrick Grogan. I'm the associate engineer with the city of Seaside. I started with the city in 2022. Before that, I was doing private consulting in the Bay Area and in Monterey County, focusing on grading inspections and special inspections, and then doing a bunch of SWIP stuff along with that. I'm a QSD and I've written a couple SWIPs for the area when I was doing consulting here, and I did a lot of QSP work for various construction clients. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. This inspection is really aimed at site personnel who are going to be doing your site inspections, whether that's a building inspector or some public works employee. It kind of differs jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but this is for the people who will be going on site regularly. So this is a required training as part of your municipal stormwater permit. This is the specific requirement for E.7, and it is, like I said, aimed at municipal staff. We're going to give kind of go through a brief overview here. These erosion control methods are applicable to construction general permit and non-construction general permit sites. Your municipality likely has some type of health and safety or erosion control muni code that's going to dictate what the requirements are for non-construction general permit sites. But the same techniques and products should be used on both sites. We're going to go over the inspection requirements for CGP sites specifically, and then we're going to go through some of the proper installation methods and common problems for the different BMPs that are used, and then just a quick little topic on how you may want to pursue enforcement on sites that aren't compliant. So who does the SWIP inspections for your municipality? It varies jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In some locations, I have seen Public Works do the inspections while the grading permit is being worked on. And then once the building permit gets approved, building will take over the inspections. In some areas, they hire a consultant and neither municipal department does it. And then in some areas, it's one or the other. It's kind of up to you guys. If your municipality doesn't have that procedure laid out, I encourage you to start that conversation and get it figured out so that these sites that are causing sediment deposition into your storm drain aren't slipping through the cracks. So for construction general permit sites specifically, they should have a QSP. If they're enrolled in the permit, they need to have a qualified SWIP practitioner. That's usually a consultant that's hired by the owner or sometimes a general contractor that will be doing weekly and rain event related inspections and then relaying the corrections that are needed to the client, not to you. So the QSPs are really not working for the municipality. They're working for the site owner or the general contractor. It's great that they're doing the inspections. They almost always do a good job. But you have to keep in mind that they work for the client, not for the municipality. And even though we're working towards the same goal, you as the site inspector for the municipality should still be checking these things and then checking their reports to make sure that their advice is getting followed or that they're properly catching the problems. So this is an example of a non-CGP site where the owner was performing a bunch of exterior flat work improvements. I believe in this case, they didn't even require a building permit because they weren't doing any structural or interior work or anything like that. They were just basically redoing the whole front yard. And this is an example of how a non-CGP site can be causing problems. They had a lot of off-site tracking that if this was during the rainy season, could then end up in your storm drain system and cause maintenance issues. We ended up getting neighbor complaints about this lot, but one of the things to keep in mind is depending on who's doing the inspections, you may not even know a site is active. So a CGP site, you're going to know that they're on a list. A building permit site, the building department at least is going to know that there's activity going on there. But if they're doing work that doesn't require a building permit, who's going to know? So this is where communication between departments is really important. And as you guys are driving around your cities, traveling to different sites, if you see another construction site you didn't know about, look into it, figure out what's going on with it. This is a location where they should have been implementing erosion control. Had they applied for a building permit, I don't remember exactly if they did or not, but had they applied for one, the city would have given them an erosion control guide. And the erosion control guide that the city gives would have outlined the procedures that they could have taken and the materials they could have installed to prevent this problem. Whether or not they follow it, then you got to follow up on. So I'm going to give a quick overview about the SMART system. This is a tool that I've found really helpful when I'm looking to see, one, if a construction site that should be registered is registered, or if I need to find who the legally responsible person is for that site, or if their erosion control plans are up to date and being followed. So this is the SMART's public user menu. You can find it by going to the website that's listed at the top. And you don't need to sign in for this. This is publicly accessible data that anyone can get. If you have a SMARTS login, that's great. But if you just click the public user menu icon down in the bottom corner there, that will take you to a couple screens where you can then find the sites that you're looking for, or even just all the sites listed in your city or municipality. So this is where I go if I want to just find info real quick. This is going to also have construction general permit data, industrial general permit data, and also your municipal permits. So after clicking the public user menu, you go ahead and click on the search for owners or operators link, and that'll take you to this screen. So we're talking about construction sites. So you would, in application, select construction, input whatever location specific data you know over on the right-hand side there. And then you click search down at the bottom. And that's going to give you a big old list of all the active and terminated permits that are for your area that you're looking for. You click the row in that column over there of the project you want, and that's going to bring you into a menu that has all of the information, all the notice of intents, which is going to have the legally responsible contact info on it, the SWIP itself, any amendments they've made, any inspection reports that the water board has made, any testing results that they were supposed to have uploaded. All that information is going to happen when you click on the right row in that column over there. I'd also like to point out that like things like the erosion control plan, you can get it from the SWIP. They're also required submissions with your civil plan set. But the SWIP is a living document. So especially for long sites, as they have problems and failures, they're supposed to be continually improving their erosion control plan. And those changes often don't get caught up in civil sets, especially once a permit's issued. They're not going to go amend that. So they are supposed to do it in the SWIP. And if you know that they have amended an erosion control plan, this is probably where it's going to be if they are following all the rules and uploading the things that they're supposed to be uploading. This is a real quick graph for the inspections required by risk level. So for your construction general permit sites, there's 3 risk levels, 1, 2, and 3, 1 being the least severe, 3 being the greatest risk of erosion and sediment off-site. So aside from what's up on the board here, you also have to do a weekly inspection. This QSP does, excuse me. The QSP has to do a weekly inspection for all their sites. When they get a rain event in the forecast that is 50% chance of precipitation or greater, that triggers a pre-storm inspection. So every site, every risk level is going to get a pre-storm inspection. If you actually get precipitation, you're going to have a daily storm inspection for the risk level 2 and 3s. And you also need to check for stormwater discharges on those sites, and the QSP should be doing all this. Also, the QSP should be doing a REAP, a rain event action plan, for all risk level 2 or 3 sites. That's a pretty simple kind of formulaic sheet that the QSP fills out ahead of time and gives to the site to let them know what specific BMPs they need to go take a look at and maybe correct, and what they should be expecting for the upcoming rain event. And then after a rain event, if you have a qualifying rain event that dumps 1/2 inch of precipitation or more, you have to do a post-storm inspection. Both the pre-storm and the post-storm inspections by the QSP are supposed to be within 48 hours of the event. So 48 hours before, 48 hours after. The reason why we need to know this is because the QSP should be placing these inspections in a binder in the job site trailer. They're required to keep that binder there. They have to have those inspections in it. Often, especially if you have large like housing developments where they have a couple different sites going on at the same time, they don't have to have a SWIP binder on every site. They could have one in a central location. Maybe they only have one job trailer for their large development. That's fine, as long as they have that information somewhere and they can give it to you. Even if that's electronically, as long as someone on site can give it to you right then, whether it's by email or hard copy or print it out for you, they have to have that there. So this is just based on my anecdotal experience when I was doing QSP inspections. These are some of the most common BMP failures and SWIP issues on sites. So when they're doing site grading, really common to have sediment discharge, especially from tracking and other things where vehicles are carrying it off of the site. Almost always the construction site entrance does not meet the requirements for that BMP. Rarely do I see a construction site entrance that actually conforms to those requirements. We'll get into that later. Dust control is also a big problem in the dry season. People think that they don't need to worry about SWIP, and they forget that SWIP isn't just about water carried runoff. Wind is also a problem, especially if you have construction sites that are right next to large housing developments or businesses. If they're kicking up a lot of dust and that's drifting into those businesses and residences, that's a problem. Once they start going upright and doing foundations, full concrete washouts is a problem. Contractors don't like to clean them out as much as they're supposed to, and they're often overlooked, and they can overflow. If they're temporary and they're fabricated on site, they can break and cause problems. When they're doing framing work, you end up getting a lot of trades stacked on top of each other, and a lot of their scrap cuts and their trash end up getting piled off just by the corner of a building somewhere. Empty epoxy containers, treated wood waste, things like that, that don't always make it up into a bin or a roll-off, and then you get a freak rain event or something like that, and it gets washed into your gutter, or you have contaminated runoff from the chemicals that are there. Especially when you're doing like EFIS exterior coating systems that involve insulation or styrofoam, or you're doing any cutting of foam, you end up with a bunch of that little particulate. That's a big problem. And for exterior coatings, paint or stucco, or really any cementitious exterior coating, always comes with a big area that ends up getting affected with concrete dust and full washouts and things like that. There are steps that they can take to help minimize those impacts, but that's one of the things that I see contractors not doing pretty frequently. So first thing when you get to the job site, you step into the job trailer, you want to look for their SWIP binder. They should have a big old thick binder that says SWIP on it, and it should have all the inspection reports in it, as well as the SWIP itself, the erosion control plan, and then any actions or inspections that the water board has also done, or any correction notices that you may have given the site. So if you get there and you're looking for critical information, you should see a front page that looks something like that. It's going to have the risk level somewhere on it. That's going to let you know what inspections should be being done so that you can check the binder and see that they're there. They should also have the owner's contact information and who prepared the SWIP. They don't always have who the QSP is. A lot of times they'll staple their card to the front of the binder or something like that. So that's always good to look forward to. They're required to have this on site or at least nearby, somewhere that you can access it whenever you want to. Other important information on the front page is going to be the WDID number. That's the number that the water board gives them when they apply for the construction general permit. And yeah. So getting into actual BMPs, construction site entrances, almost never done correctly. Luckily, we got a big screen here for the people who are online. In case this is kind of small for you and you can't read it, I'll go through the important parts that are commonly not done correctly. So the main requirement is if they're using rock, it has to be 3-inch minimum to 6-inch maximum. Nothing smaller than 3 inches, nothing bigger than 6 inches. Quite often you'll see people put down like class 2 drain rock or something like that for their site entrance. Problem with that is it's not bumpy enough. It smooths out when the tires and the vehicles are rolling over it. There's no agitation or action to help knock off that mud or that sediment. Also, commonly now we're seeing like the yellow tracking plates that have like the pyramid shaped cones on them, or you might see the old style, the bar plates. Those will end up filling up with sediment, and those are things that need to be looked at. The other most common problem is that they don't meet the minimum length requirements. So there's 2 measurements given here for total length. One is 50 feet minimum. The other one is 4 times the circumference of the largest tire on the site. A semi tire, the circumference is about 10 feet, but when you have backhoes or larger equipment that have larger construction tires, those are going to mean that you need more than 50 feet length in order to have proper tracking control by the BMP. Quite often, they'll put 2 or 3 plates down and call it good. That's 20 to 30 feet at the most. That's not enough. The other requirement that is often not properly implemented is that they're supposed to put down their construction entrance and exit in such a way that vehicles can't bypass it, not even with 1 tire. So they need to have some way to channel vehicles to force them to use the plates, cones, temp fencing, whatever it's going to be. Quite often you'll see vehicles drop in a tire to try and get around the vibrations because it might be uncomfortable as they're driving over it. So yeah. Also, for when they're doing a rock entrance, it's supposed to have a minimum depth of 12 inches. And they're also supposed to clean it out periodically. They want to lay it out in such a way that if the site drains off this entrance, they have a drainage ditch or some type of topographical feature that will channel any flow that runs across this entrance away from the entrance of the site. Whether they cut a little ditch, whether they put in a swale, something like that. So this is kind of the typical construction entrance that we see. And this one was actually really good. I went around, I drove all over Seaside. This was the best one I saw. Still had a couple problems. They were just shy on the length. They were close, but you don't get points for being close. You got to hit 50 feet minimum. So I don't remember exactly what they were, but they were 40 something feet. Also, they had filled in a lot of their rock. They had smaller rock than 3 inches in there. So once you got past the tracking plates, it wasn't really bumpy. It was a pretty smooth ride for the passenger car that I was in, so it wasn't really going to knock loose any sediment that was on any vehicle crossing it. These are some of the worst ones. As you can see here, really easy to get around those, especially this is a picture of those newer style tracking plates that we're starting to see. You can see that it's starting to fill up with dirt and sediment. Periodic cleaning is required, at least every couple of months or as needed. So if your site is filling up its tracking control, its cattle grates, whatever, within a couple of weeks, you got to go lift them up, clean them out, and put them back. Often it's a good idea for people to put some type of filter fabric or some other layer down under it so that it's easier to pick it up and then sweep off and remove the loose sediment. You get a lot of the fine particulate sediment, silts and sands and just stuff that gets pounded down into nothing that packs those in. And if you just set the grate back in it, it'll fill right back up again. So you want to make sure that they are periodically picking up the grate, cleaning out all the loose stuff as needed, and then putting it back down. Also, another example of the correct size rock, but getting filled in with smaller stuff and dirt as vehicles drive around it. You can even see the tire tracks on either side. So fencing placement here, you can see that if they had just closed this fence up a little bit to the edges of the yellow tracking plates, they would have made an effective enough barrier that vehicles would be forced to drive on the tracking plates. Still not long enough, but at least people wouldn't be dropping wheels off the side like they are here. And then this is what it results in. This isn't that bad. They had cleaned this up not that far before I came, but they were still getting people taking stuff off site, and they ended up with a couple inches worth of sediment in the gutter. This was in advance of a rainstorm, so they did go out and sweep up that gutter. But if they are having tracking problems like this and they haven't implemented sweeping or something else, that might be a requirement that you force them to put in place. Or you as the municipality, if you have street sweeping, you can do it and charge them for it. But tracking, even minor tracking like this, isn't allowed. It's got to be nothing coming off that site. So fiber rolls, also commonly not installed correctly. Fiber rolls are supposed to be trenched into the ground a few inches. 2 inches is pretty standard. And then they have to be staked or otherwise secured. I've seen like gravel bags or sandbags used every 4 feet. That's fine as long as there's no daylight between the bags. When I was a QSP, I had a site that was having trouble with their fiber rolls. Minorly, everything was good except for a couple areas, and the municipality's inspector was on his hands and knees looking under the fiber roll for daylight, finding a couple areas and then making them go fix it. Technically, he is right, pretty extreme, but the point of a fiber roll is to catch a flow, hopefully a sheet flow, and then filter out some of that sediment as it passes through it. So if there's daylight under it, it's not being effective in its placement. These are commonly used for perimeter control, and that's a fine use. They're also well placed as erosion control at intervals along slopes. Going with the topography of the slope, they should be placed just below the crown at 10 to 15 to 20 foot intervals, depending on the slope. And in the BMP guides, there is a slope requirement for how far that is based on what the angle is. And then at the toe of the slope as well. That way they function as check dams and they filter out sediment. They can help prevent erosion and channel flow as if they're placed correctly. The ends also should be overlapped by at least a foot. Commonly, they're not. They're just butted end to end. That leaves a space for water to collect and flow through and possibly cause channel flow, and that's a problem. These also are supposed to be cleaned out periodically or replaced. The rule of thumb is 1/3 the depth of the sediment control. So these are normally like 6 to 8 inches tall. So if you get 1/3 of the way up the exposed depth, they need to replace that or clear out the sediment. Here's a couple of pictures from stuff when I was walking around. You have not placed at the site perimeter, not placed correctly here. They're just kind of slapped down. They're not even staked in. And they need to be placed at the edge of the disturbed area. Otherwise, it's not going to fully prevent sediments from leaving the site during the rain. Also, fiber rolls stacked on top of fiber rolls. One fills up, they slap another one on top and call it good. Not supposed to do that. Or the ends aren't properly overlapped. That's a spot where you're going to get water maybe transitioning to channel flow from sheet flow and causing greater erosion. Not pictured, but also common, damaged, ripped, or flattened fiber rolls. They've been there for a year. They're past their service life. People run over them with cars. They get flattened out, or they're ripped or cut. Not supposed to happen. So if they're damaged, they're supposed to be replaced. Moving on to silt fence. Commonly not properly trenched in and staked down. So silt fence is intended to detain water. It's intended to detain sediment-laden water so that the sediment has time to settle out and the water will collect and disperse. The problem with that is that silt fence needs to be placed in such a way that it doesn't channelize flow. So it's not even meant to really intercept a flow, more to just delay the time on site so that the sediment can drop out of it. Commonly, it's put at the perimeter of projects, which can be fine, but can also be a problem if it's placed like across a drainage channel. These are also suitable below the toe of a slope. I think 3 feet away is kind of what the guidance says. Or you can do it closer if you don't have 3 feet, but a little bit of a couple feet past the toe of a slope or along a stream channel. So going with the stream channel, not across the stream channel. They can be used in the event of increased stream elevation. Silt fence is not designed to redirect concentrated flows and should only be used for sheet flow. Cannot be used to divert water. You're just going to end up getting a blowout and causing more erosion and more problems. It's also not intended for mid-slope or top-of-slope conditions. Same thing, you're going to end up with a blowout and you're going to get some real erosion or some other channelized flow that just takes a bunch of sediment down with it. To properly install the silt fencing, they're supposed to excavate a 6 by 6 inch trench and key in approximately 12 inches of the fabric. On all silt fences, there is a line on the bottom of the fabric that's 12 inches above the bottom where it's not stapled in. That's the line that it's supposed to be buried to. And with this, you're also supposed to remove or clean out when it's at 1/3 the height with sediment accumulation. So here's an example. You can see that blue line where this should have been buried to and wasn't. This is really common, or you see it not being staked in very securely. The stake hole is a little loose. Wind comes along, someone knocks it over, and never gets picked back up. So these are kind of the most common problems with silt fence not being installed correctly. It takes time to install it correctly, and that's man hours. People don't really want to do it. Also, one that almost never gets caught, covered roll-off bins or covered trash cans. A site is required to cover their waste disposal in advance of a rain. If it's being used, it can be uncovered, but before the rain starts, you got to cover it. Tarp, plastic, some of them come with the covers. That's great. This isn't just roll-off bins. It's also trash cans next to portable toilets or any trash piles that people have been leaving out on the site. They need to pick it up, put it in the bin, and then cover it. They're also not supposed to have a full bin. When the bin starts to get full, they need to come get it emptied. Whether that's calling the company early or what, they just need to come get it emptied. It also needs to be protected from wind. If you are on a windy site, if you're in a windy area, common problem is the wind picking up the lighter trash and blowing it out of the bin. They have to take steps to do that. Also covered in advance of a rainstorm are washouts. Paint washouts, concrete washouts, things like that. You are not supposed to have uncovered washouts, especially if there's liquid in them. If your washout is uncovered and it's your paint washout and then it fills up with rainwater and overflows, big problem. Now you're supposed to be testing if it goes off site for contaminants and other things like that. So yeah. Here's an example of not a rain, but just wind causing a problem. All kinds of paper towels and stuff that blew out of that trash can or maybe out of the paper towel holder and into that web fence right there. And then some of it had made its way onto the golf course there. So this is just one of the examples why covering your trash containers is really important. No one wants to have to go pick that up. And also now you're affecting the property just beyond your construction site. Also notice the tray under the hand wash station. I wasn't able to find a picture of a porta potty without one, but they are required. That's what they look like. This is what it looks like when they don't have one. Normal porta potty, most people walk right by it, think, yeah, no problem. You're supposed to have containment on your porta potties. There's a chemical in there for the waste receptacle. If that doesn't have it and it overflows or something else happens and it spills, that's a problem. This is really common where they're not placing a tray. Like I said, I didn't see any when I walked around. That was great. But this is a common thing that I saw when I was doing a lot of inspections. Material containment. So proper containment is required for the following materials. This isn't a full list. This is just most of them. Soil stabilizers and binders, pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, detergents, plaster, fuel, oil, and grease, asphalt, concrete components and compounds, hazardous materials and chemicals, and really any material that could be detrimental to the environment if released. That's what it says in their guidance. It's kind of a catch-all. Often, and especially when they're being used, you'll see people leave them out on the site. As long as they pick them up and go put them back in containment, that's great. What does containment look like? Kind of looks like this. So depending on what the product is, for example, bags of cementitious products, grout or cement or stucco or something like that, they can be stored on a pallet as long as they're covered in plastic. But things like fuel oils, grease, and other things like that need to be undercover or in some type of burned containment. Chemicals must be stored in approved watertight containers with secondary containment or in a storage shed. Storage areas on bare soil need to be bermed and lined. So you can't just plop it down on the sand, drop a fiber roll around it and call it good. You got to put down some plastic liner or something like that. Stored under cover when possible, especially cementitious products or erodible materials that are stored on pallets, and also keep a spill kit nearby. Back over to concrete washouts. Here's an example of a fabricated temporary concrete washout and just a kind of prefab one. Often you'll see kiddie pools or something like that used for concrete washouts. Kiddie pools don't technically meet the requirements. A lot of people use them for small pours, and frequently we see spills or other problems with them. So fabricated or temporary washouts are allowed, but must be suitably sized to contain all solid and liquids associated with a washout event. Fabricated washouts must be lined and burned. So in this case, they stuck some 1x or some 1x12s down on the ground, put some plastic over them, and then started filling up with concrete. They ended up having a failure where it broke, and they were also above their minimum depth. So the minimum sizes for a fabricated washout, and really for any washout, you're supposed to be minimum 10 feet in width by 10 feet in length. I believe you also have to be at least 12 feet in depth, but the depth is really more dependent on your capacity. You're never supposed to have more than 75% capacity in the washout or have less than 4 inches of freeboard. Freeboard is the space that from the surface of the water or solid to where it's going to overflow. Never supposed to have more than 4 inches. Also, no rips or tears in the lining. Often they will fill up a washout, make a new one right next to it, and leave that one there to harden. They are supposed to break it up, put it in their off haul, and get it taken care of. Concrete especially can really affect the pH of runoff, especially when it's fresh. It decreases as it gets older, but it's one of the common things that people forget about. And when, did I hit next? Sorry. When your washout breaks like that and overflows onto the site, this was like 30 feet from the site boundary. And the topography of the area was such that in a really bad rain event, it could have offloaded onto the site and into our gutter. Stockpile management, also a common one. Active stockpiles do not need to be covered. Inactive stockpiles do. What's an inactive stockpile? Inactive stockpile is a stockpile is inactive if it's not scheduled to be utilized within the next 14 days. So a lot of people think that means that they can do nothing with it for 14 days and then cover it. If you don't plan to use that stockpile in the next 14 days, you have to cover it. It is inactive. It also is supposed to be burned. Often people will weigh down some fiber rolls around the edge of the stockpile. Or they won't completely cover the stockpile. They'll slap some plastic tarp over it or some polyethylene or something and call it good. Wind picks it up and moves it, or it doesn't reach all the way, or the seams open up where they've used multiple pieces of covering. They're supposed to be properly weighed down, sandbags, gravel bags, whatever weighted situation you have to get it to stay in place where the wind is going on. Should be covered with plastic sheeting or tarps. If you're using plastic sheeting, you need to be careful that it's not on there too long. It does degrade in the sun. So if they're leaving a stockpile covered for months on end, that needs to be periodically checked, and any damaged sheeting needs to be replaced. Yeah, and they're also supposed to berm it. So it's not just slap a cover on it. You're also supposed to berm around the edges. How are we doing on time? Okay. Dust control. big one that gets forgotten. Everybody just thinks of SWIP as being a wet weather thing. It is also a dry weather thing. SWIP is not just during the quote unquote rainy season, which is October 10th to April, or October 15th to April 15th. SWIP is all the time. People don't like to hear that. They try and save money by having their QSPs not come out during the dry season. They're still supposed to come out and do their weekly inspections. One of the common problems during that time is windblown dust, especially if you're doing something right next to a housing development or a bunch of businesses. So they're supposed to implement some type of dust control. If they're not going to be doing watering of the area, and they're also not going to be doing work in the area, they can use a soil stabilizer. Most common one is for them to use a water truck or some other means of moisture control for the soil. You need to be careful they don't do it so much that they cause off-site flows. Leaky water trucks, leaky fire hydrants, stuff like that can be a problem. So during the dry season, you have to look for that. And just basically, are you getting complaints about it? Are you seeing dust when they're driving around? Then it needs to get fixed. Okay, so finishing up here. Enforcement. When I've had interactions and discussions with water board staff, they recommend 72 hours to correct deficiencies. That depends on if there's weather upcoming or not, and how severe the weather is going to be, and also what the history of the site is. When it comes to enforcement on a municipal level, it's kind of up to you. Hopefully your city has a standard procedure for this kind of thing. Often it would mirror code enforcement for building violations. Oftentimes erosion control is required by your muni code. For Seaside, it's section 8.46. And it's under the health and safety one. Yours may be different, but it's probably has the same kind of requirements and goals. So like I said, 72 hours is kind of standard unless you got weather coming up forecasted, or if they have a history of non-compliance and you need to start being more forceful with them. A lot of these fixes and a lot of the common problems can be fixed right away. They're not hard. Maybe they need to go get a couple more materials, but in general, we're not asking for a lot of work to fix these. If it gets to it, and if you have erosion control in your muni code or in your jurisdiction code, you can elevate to a building official, a city engineer, a public works director. These sites have building permits. They have other things that have conditions that they conform to their erosion control plans on them. Also, you can contact the water board. I have had sites where the water board has said, hey, we see, like on Google Earth imagery, that this site that's been open for 2 years always has tracking every year when it gets photoed. Is there a problem with it? Do you need us to come take a look and see what's going on? If a site is not complying with your requests to fix their BMPs, the water board expects you to loop them in and contact them. You should also be, having written documentation by the time you get here that you've been requesting corrections. Submitting emails to the site personnel with photos of the problems and steps and timelines is a good way to document that. Keep in mind that the SWIP is not supposed to be a rigid, static document, and it's not designed to be like a perfect plan to prevent erosion. Even the water board will say that it's impossible to prevent all of the failures on a site. You might just get a freak 100-year storm, or some kid walking by could come pull up all the silt fence, on the weekend and go have a sword fight with the sticks, something like that. There's no way to ensure perfect compliance. The goal of the SWIP is to have continuous improvement. When you have a failure, what are you doing to address it? Was your erosion control plan implemented correctly? If not, implement it correctly. If it was implemented correctly, how can you change it to better prevent that failure? If you do have a failure and your erosion control plan is in place effectively, they should be talking with the QSP and submitting an amendment to the SWIP with the revised erosion control plan. And also, if you have a site where they're just making an honest mistake, education tends to go over better than enforcement. If they are habitual offenders, then that's when you can start using your own judgment to determine how heavy-handed do you want to be with it. So that is the conclusion. Thank you very much. Just in closing, wanted to say to keep an eye out for erosion control issues whenever you're driving by a site or on the site. You're probably not there for that. You're probably going by to look at some plumbing, check some framing, do something like that. But those erosion control issues are still going on. You're the person on site. No one else is. So when you're on site and you see it, say something, document it, send an email. Let whoever's supposed to be doing your SWIP enforcement know that it needs to be corrected. And if your municipality or jurisdiction hasn't implemented a standard procedure for how to do SWIP inspections on all of your sites, non-CGP and CGP, start that conversation with your department head, your building official, whoever, so that you guys can get a procedure in place. If you get audited for your municipal permit by the water board, they will check that you have something in place. They want to see how are you doing these inspections. So having that documented and having a history of your inspections is going to be really important to provide that info to them. That's a requirement of your municipal permit. So yeah, and that's it. Thank you very much, guys. Seconds.
We will have your certificates available to you after today. I don't know exactly how long that will take, but we will make sure you get them. And thank you so much for coming today.